Hello all. So in this session or the video, we'll try to understand what is API gateway or API, how exactly it is going to work, and what are the features and how we can make utilize of API gateways. Okay, so in this session, we're going to try to understand that is what is API gateway and how many types of API gateway we have, and among that what is a RESTful API, what would be the advantages, and we'll try to understand by looking into the use case. And also, if you want to use some services or the features, there should be some advantages, right? And we'll try to ignore the disadvantages. Obviously, if we want some advantages, we will be having the disadvantages too. But what are the major advantages to use these two? We'll go ahead and see all those things and along with some use cases. Fine. So initially we'll start with by understanding what is API gateway. So API gateway is a managed service that allows you to create, publish, maintain, and monitor and secures API at any scale. So what? So it is a kind of a serverless things too. So the main intention or the main objective of using the API to do any CRUD operations or to do any transactions like fetching or updating things like that. Fine. So where it going to help us to integrate two things. One is front end as well as back end. So we need to call each together, right? To associate both them, we make use of API, right? And we have some addition called gateway. So what it could be? So let me take an example. So probably you might have observed your login pages of any web application irrespective of thing, and also the mobile applications too. So probably it will prompt us initially for the credentials, so followed by the two-factor authentication. It has been mandated from last few years for many applications, but not all. Right? So there you people might have observed. So whenever you hit login, it will prompt you to another page. So if you are using the web application, probably you might make out the changes by looking into the URL. So the domain will remain same, but the followed by things are completely replaced. That is your complete URL thing or path to your application. So why it is so? All because of API gateway itself. So they are not in one component. So they are each modules will be distributed and they have to some that is they make use of microservice concepts, and they deploy each microservice independently and they link all together in one. So that was the main reason where we can that is integrate the API gateway. Okay, so you have some login microservice. Okay, so you're going to create the URL or the API gateway according to the requirement, and you will have it in the UID. Fine. And next is you going to have two-factor authentication. So once you hit login, if the credentials are validated, thereafter it should prompt you to do two-factor authentication. Even after accomplishing that stage, directly will be prompted to your application, right? We only can able to view the UI and UX things, but not a REST. So how exactly the backend is happening, everything we don't know, right? So this is how the backend things are linked using the API gateways to the front end. So fine. So it acts as a front door for the application to access data. So simply if you have API gateway, even you cannot able to access the data too without the UID components. Why? Because there also you should be having some programmatical knowledge. Unless until you cannot able to get the resources. what is available on the, could be on database or could be on your server. Fine. To access, so they are telling that business logics or functionality from backend services. Fine. So which are deployed on, either it could be a lambda function or EC2 instance. In other words, you can make it as server, and DynamoDB is kind of a database where it's of no SQL thing. Fine. And many more services if you are using within the AWS. Fine. Even the same concept or the scenario or the working of API gateway is common, as I just explained. Right. Nice. Here, API gateway supports both RESTful and WebStocks API, making it versatile for building modern web applications to support backend services. Fine. So we'll go and understand things. Hopefully, you have understand the concept of API and the API gateway. Fine. So why exactly we should go, or what could be the advantages of going with API gateway and all. Fine. So next is we do have some kinds of API gateways in AWS especially. So that is, first one is REST API. So that is we use to create RESTful API. So we'll understand what exactly those are. And suppose standard, it will follows the HTTP protocol to do your CRUD operations. So it could be for create, or that is get means you will be fetching the data, and if you are posting and putting, both are quite similar. Posting in the sense you will be creating new thing, and put is for updating and the delete. So enables features such as caching, throttling, and usage plan. So what could caching does actually? So whenever you try to access the resources, initially it will take few milliseconds to respond you back. So again, if you try to access the same resource next day, you will get within the fraction of milliseconds. Fine. So that is the major difference. So once you have visited that site means, the cache or the data will be stored in your local browser. Fine, that is local caching, we can call it as. So the same thing will be used in future days if you are using or if you are visiting the same website. Fine. So that's it, takes very less time to load or to get response of the same website. Fine, that is the main advantages of caching things. And throttling is, that is, it will be more faster when it comes, when it has cache stored on your local machines. And the usage plans, so allows integration with, so these API should be integrated with any of the services to access things. So initially, as I just mentioned, so we majorly use this API gateway to link your backend as well as frontend. So we need to prompt to that desired function, right, or the problem statement. So we need some agents to be pointed to that one, right, whenever we call that something. So for that purpose, we make use of API gateway. So it's the gate of the, it's the gate between the front as well as the front end as well as the back end. So if you wanted to get into the resources, definitely you need to have access. That is, we make use of gateway to get the access of resources. Fine. Another one is HTTP API. Obviously, everybody knows and more familiar thing. It's lighter and faster, that is more cost-effective options for RESTful API, since it supports HTTP. So built for low latency application. So it supports, we can have the authorization key or the API key like that. So ideal for microservices and event driven architectures where minimal configuration is preferred. Fine. Another one is WebSocket API. So WebSocket. So socket, probably people might have know, right? So we'll be going to plug our cables and all, or the charger adapters. So there we are doing two-way communications things. So we are trying to access the electricity from that port, right? And to hold that power or to transmit that power, we have used adapter. So adapter will going to instruct that we will be pushing out the electricities from this when it is on, like that, right? So exactly the same way here also the web socket in a sense. So most of the web applications are, it's not like the web, even it could be your mobile application, like that. Fine. So designed for real-time two-way communication. So when we try to have our application more dynamically, for example, WhatsApp. So if I just hit hi, definitely the other person, the other side can able to see the hi, right? So it is happening so dynamically. So whatever I type here, he can see there, and whatever he types or she types, I can able to make out. So that is how the WebSocket APIs are working. So supports persistent connections, making it suitable for chat applications and real-time dashboards for or the notification. So even you can consider ChatGPTs or Gemini and all. So we provide some questions and it will throw us back with solution, right? So for the intended question itself, we are doing transactions. So we are posting our requirement and we are getting it back, right? So you might have understood, I think. Okay, so next is we'll try to understand what is a RESTful API. So its name quite different, right? RESTful. So what the abbreviation states, representational state transfer API. It's a kind of proto kind. So it is an architectural style for designing network applications. So it allows communication between the client like mobile app or web application and service, that is sorry server, by using the HTTP methods to perform operation on resources. So why we make use of RESTful API? So whenever there is a transaction between the front end as well as the back end, we do some data and back end will validate and will revert it back. You have successfully logged in, all those things. So for all those kinds of operations, we make use of RESTful API. So for example, you might take e-commerce application where you going to make payment, right? So once the payment received to the bank, automatically the backend will process the our request. That is, the payment has received from this client or this user against the product which are in the cart, and it will revert it back with you have successfully placed your order against prepaid, like that, right? So we are doing the transaction thing. So I'm sending something, in response I'm getting back, right? So for all those things we'll be getting like this. And APIs follows the set of principles that make them lightweight, stateless, and easy to use. And we'll have some advantages of using RESTful APIs. Scalability, lightweight and stateless, allowing easy scale across large distributed system. So why it is so lightless? You don't require to link your module or the microservices with other thing. So whenever you hit that particular trigger or the event, only on that case it will trigger the individual microservice, unless until it is not. So since it's weightless and stateless, allowing easy scaling across large distributed system. Fine. So only particular on if people are making too much of transaction at a time, only on that case that microservice will scale up. That is the resource where you have deployed in Lambda, or it could be amplifier wherever. Even the RESTful API will handle the traffics. Fine. So that is how it is. Flexible and modularity. So a REST API can be consumed by the varieties of client, making it easy to deploy cross-platform application. So you can have multiple things. It's not like limited to you be used in your Windows or uh, Mac, like Ubuntu. You can have multiple, that is cross platform. That is like, for example, so probably initially before Meta, so all three were different organization: WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, everything, right? So now they are all together one. Since the application are running different stages and different modulars, though we can able to share our stories or status among all three applications under one roof, that is Meta, right? So there we can make out cross platform application. So from WhatsApp, whatever you are trying to share or trying to post it on your status, same thing can be shared in Instagram as well as Facebook. So there we'll be using two different components for the application, right, to share our data. That is how it is helpful. Simplicity using standard method or the protocol HTTP and the format like JSON, and stateless operation. So reduce server load, improving the performance and scalability as each request is independent. So we are making only payment request. Only on that microservice or the server will work. The rest will be silent, right? So it's quite easy to handle and to maintain logs and to rectify any issues during the transactions too. So that is the advantages of going with RESTful API and also with API. So even the same advantage we can have it in our API gateway too. So they had given some examples. So with operations, so we do have assume that we have some e-commerce application. So where you are trying to do. So get means the get operation. So it will going to retrieve all the products which are under catalog. Just assume. Okay, fine. So in or probably in all applications, that is e-commerce application, we do have all category tabs or the icon, right? So this call will be made on that time. Fine. So if you are doing particular with the ID, means here they have taken one, two, three. Probably you can go with some keywords. So whatever they had defined for that product. So if you have passed the keyword as you, if you are looking for running shoes, so the running shoes will be the keyword here, like one, two, three. So only those product will display. Other than that, it won't. So fine. And post. So if the client or the backend team have to update with new product, so how they have to do? Definitely they have to go with create new product. When it comes to UI, the backend will process the link like this. So on that case, the post method will be called using the API gateway, which will help you to create or store the data in the backend, which is provided from the UI, right? And if you wanted to update the products, actually same put will be used. And if the product goes out, so if the product goes out of stock or it won't extend, on that case it's not necessary to keep it on your applications. So it will occupy some space, right? So you can free it by deleting it. So to do any kind of transactional data between the front end as well as the back end to process, we make use of RESTful API. It acts as an agent between two components and help us to interact more efficiently. Okay. And another use case we do have. So RESTful APIs are widely used in web application, mobile application, and IoT based. So because they offer an efficient way to communicate. So obviously, whenever we don't use it in desktop applications, but we use it in web application as well as mobile application, and also with IoT things. So why do we require IoT things? So if some objects passes, obviously it will call some backend things, right? It will recognize based on the code whatever we have written like that. So wherever there is any transactions are done in response to input, they all will be using the RESTful API itself. So without over HTTP, so without the need of maintaining complex connections. Fine. And also the common use cases are included exposing, that is application data to external application. So as I just state of meta, right, same thing. So building backends for mobile apps, enabling microservice communication, creating scalable serverless architecture using the platform like AWS API Gateway and the Lambda. So in Lambda, we going to run our problem statement. How do we access our problem statement, or how do we pass our requirement to our problem statement to process the result? So with the help of API Gateway, like, fine. And we'll have some advantages of going with AWS API Gateway. So it's the fully managed service. So AWS manages scaling, load balancing, and maintenance, and freeing up the development resources. So if you have multiple requests are coming more frequently, and on that case, you need to configure or you need to have the independent load balancer if you do not going with the AWS API Gateway, or if you are trying to deploy your application in manual thing. Fine. So when it comes to AWS API Gateway, they provide even load balancer. So that is what they are telling. We are fully managed service. Only thing you need to have your domain name followed by the path to your resources. That's all. Rest will be taken care by the AWS itself. So that is why it is called as fully managed service and scalability. So automatically, so when there is a large request, you don't need to manage everything. So it is their responsibility to manage things and secure access control. Even you need not to write script, additional script for maintaining the security and all. Even those will be taken care by AWS itself. And you can have additional security by passing the tokens of API or additional extra tokens like this. And analytics and monitoring. So you should know, right, how many requests are coming and how many requests are success, how many requests showing bad requests and all. We do have analyticals and monitoring in AWS by accessing or by linking through the CloudWatch. Cost effective. So here we only make payment or get billed for the events or the trigger we pass, right? So pay only for the API calls and the data transfer with right pricing model and caching to reduce the operational cost. So if your applications or the problem statements are not being used for 5 hours, means you need not to pay any money to AWS. So unless until it is active, that is if any transactions are being happened, right? And flexible integration. So as I just initially mentioned, so it's not only limited to few services. So we can integrate with multiple AWS services too. So integration seamlessly with AWS Lambda, and if you want your services to be accessed within your network, private network on that case, you can deploy it under one VPC and other AWS too, services too. So making it flexible for the varieties of use cases. Fine. We'll have that. So as I initially mentioned, it's a serverless application. So it completely works on the trigger thing. Fine. So if somebody clicks on Lambda, so on click event function will have the API gateway, that is the URL. So once the URL got invoked, automatically the Lambda function will be triggered. Since we have added the API gateway as an event to the Lambda function, so we'll try to understand practically. So trigger Lambda functions for processing request. So without managing the service, microservice architecture. So even the same thing, you can deploy your microservice and try to communicate securely. And mobile application, web application, and IoT. If you are going with real-time communication, then go with WebSocket API. Fine, data transformation and validation. So each and everything is validated and data will be stored, that is the logs will be stored. Now whatever the data you will be transacting, that won't be stored. So, but the logs, whatever the logs we do, everything we can able to have it. Data format and handling the authorizations, everything we have. We'll try to understand by looking into the application, right? So we were speaking about API gateway, right? So either in the global search you can provide the API gateway, or if you have recently been used, you can go with here, or you can access it from here too. And so when you do not have any APIs created priorly or previously, so this is the landing page where it's take you. Fine. So even you can observe here too. So whenever I hit back, so the domain will remain same, but the path will changes. So console home region will be like this. So whenever I hit enter for this application, automatically it will takes to different page, right? So now the address is completely replaced. So this is how the API gateway exactly works, right? So the API gateway main page like that. So here we have different kinds of APIs. Okay, so based on our usage, we can go on. So if you are going with HTTP API, that is for low latency and more cost effective things, we can go with like this. If you are doing any transactional things, more data transaction, on that case we can go with this. Or if you are going with minimal things, so where you gain complete control over the request and response, that is backend things will all work. On that case you can go with RESTful API. And if you are deploying within your VPC or within your private network, which should block access to the publics who are not on that network, on that case you can have it here, deploy your application here. So only within that network your application or the resources will be available. So if you want make available to anyone, you can go with this one. I hit build. So here once you hit build, so here we do have multiple options. Either you can create the new API, or if you have any existing configuration you can go with it, or if you have written it in local machine, from there also you can import. Fine. Or they do have some examples API. So we'll try to create new one. We'll make it as demo and regional. So regional APIs are deployed in current AWS region. So in my this region it will going to deploy. Or if you want to edge optimize things, edge in the sense each and everywhere it is going to create wherever they have they want edge locations. So private in the sense it will restrict the access. Hit create, and description should be provided based on your work. Okay. So now what we have done, we just created the API called demo. So still we have not linked any backend or front end things. Only we have created some API. Okay, so just one function we have called, that is demo, to do interaction with backend as well as the front end. So still we have not linked anything. Fine. So assume that we'll try to have. So we'll try to have our problem statement in Lambda. So we'll create new function from scratch. We'll try to provide demo itself, and I will be choosing the environment as Python. See here, so we have some, assume that this is my problem statement and I wanted to access this message. So here I do not have any URLs to access my problem or the resource hello world from Lambda. So if I wanted to access this one, so how should I access? So for that, I just go and create, I've just created the API to interact with my backend thing. Fine. Assume this is my backend and this is the API I'm using to access my backend. Since I do not have created any front end or the HTML things, I'm going to show you in the terminal. Fine. That is our raw test will be done. So anyhow, we'll go and try to do. Okay. So here we have something called resource. In case create resource. So what it is, what exactly it is. So you have written the functions or the class having the multiple function and you have used inheritance, all those things, oops concept. You have written it and you have linked one function to another function and all, right? So whenever you try to access or whenever you try to browse some products, definitely it will the address to that object will be different, right? To the home page to that. So assume I can show you people here. So this is the domain, that is console.aws.amazon.com. This will be static if you are using that their application. So followed by so where I have gone to create resources, under where I have creating the resources under API Gateway. API means, so this has encrypted, that is my API function name followed by resource. So what I am trying to create here, resource. So exactly same thing here I will be creating. So if you have some default domain means, that is console.aws.amazon.com, that will appear here followed by like this API Gateway, like that. So if you have another resource or the another folder or another function inside that function to access that function, you can have it here like this. So it will come in a, that is tree structure format. So inside that we can have method. So what is method? These are the methods. Okay. So if you want to delete, that means that function what exactly is doing. So is that function working for delete or to get or to options, patch, post, put, any of these methods are happening. So that is the one, and we'll try to move back and we'll delete these two. Why I have deleted means, here directly inside my function I have written the code, right? That is hello world from Lambda. So here I do not have any path to access here. Directly I can able to get it. So just I create the method. What method? If you want to fetch data, definitely we'll be going with get method. So from where I have deployed the application in Lambda function. So that is why I'm choosing here Lambda. Or else if you have deployed in somewhere else, you can have it here. Or if you wanted to access the resources which are deployed in another resource, that is services of AWS, you can go it here. Or if you have your resources within the VPC, on that case also we can choose this one. So since we will be using the Lambda, we are going with Lambda function. Fine. Here I will be using the proxy thing. So for the security. So whatever the request we send to your Lambda functions are structured. Fine. Here I will be choosing my function, that is demo. Fine. Just I go and create my thing. So right now we have just created the, that is we just link the backend, right? And we got some, just we have linked our front end with backend. Okay. So still we have not deployed it. So unless until we deploy, we could not able to access publicly. Fine. So we'll try to test locally whether we can able to see here. So what should my response? It should be hello world from lambda. Fine. So the status code is 200. That means you are trying to access the data whatever you have written inside this function. So for example, if you can have, so once you have written, you need to deploy your application here. So without deployment, you cannot able to access things. So it is got deployed, and we'll try to run it again. Can I access it? This is how the API gateway will work. Fine. And if you wanted to access or make it available these resources to public means you need to deploy it. So either you can use the key deploy API or you can go and have it here also. So we'll have it. So here they are showing the stages, right? So stages is nothing but if you are doing the testing, you can have your testing stage, or if you are deploying or the production like that. Here I will give the same name as demo and will deploy our resources. So I will be getting this URL. Since I did not provide anything, that is, this is the function or the API name. So followed by execute API, this is the region, and followed by nothing. Okay. So I can able to access the data. So if my lambda function is working, same you can have this URL in your system and you can try to access the data, whatever the data is available or the associated with this function. Fine. This is the simple one. This is how you can make or you can access the data with the help of API Gateway. And we understood resource, how we can create the resource, under the resource what are the operations we can do, that is method, and why do we use the stage, right? And here we have some authorization. So you can add the authorization by creating the authorization thing. So that is, if they have the token with them, they can able to access the resources, or else they cannot. So you can create that. And the gateway response, obviously whenever you try to access the resources on the web, we have come across many of the status code, right? They are all predefined things, and the models is, and the resource policy. So some applications or some products are restricted to some regions and some are not like that, right? So for all those things we can create the resource policies. So for example, if you have restricted the IP range, so for example, I will be restricting the IP from, that is here, I will going to mention the block from where to where, means from 192.168.1.1 to 192.168.1.20 I will do. So only those 20 systems can able to access the resource, rest cannot access the resources available in this function or the URL. So even we can have like that also. And the documentation thing, that we you can have your documentation, so what exactly is happening and all. Okay, so this is your complete dashboard, that is your URL. So how many calls happened like that, and latency, integration latency in the sense how much time it took to interact with the lambda function. So whenever an event occurs, how fast it is accessing like that. And you can manage your API thing here. So this is kind of one demo or the practical thing. So probably you might have understood exactly how the API gateway or the API calls happen backend. Fine. So we'll try to have another one. We'll try to replace. Okay. So here I have written the lambda function where I wanted to store some data in my DynamoDB or my database. Fine. So we'll create that also. We'll create table in the name of CRUD, and here we will be providing the partition key is nothing but the primary key, and here we will be going with the integer or the numeral names. Okay, I will go with default and create the table. Fine. So now what exactly will happen is, so I have written the function to interact with my lambda, sorry, DynamoDB from the lambda. So will I have access to my function? So definitely no. So we need to configure the permissions. Okay, so according to the requirement, and also you need to maximize the timeout, since it mandatorily required. So within 3 seconds we cannot able to interact with any other services, so the latency will be like 10-15 seconds. It varies according to the traffic. Okay, so based on the traffic. So here we do have permission, so where we have written the function, that is lambda function, to do all the CRUD operations, like to create post, that is to create, to delete, all those things. Okay, so here we have our role is nothing but the permission what my lambda function wants. So here we have basic execution role. So we are allowed to do execution on lambda, but we are not allowed to access any other resources of AWS or outside the AWS. So if you want to have to access any other AWS resources, for example, let me run this code and we'll try to show you people. Okay, so it is showing error. Okay. So we'll create new called demo. Okay, so we'll test this. What error we're going to get. So what it is returning, so the body is missing or the empty. Okay, fine. So we'll try to have our things. Okay, we'll delete this thing. So it will create that one. Okay, we'll delete only the method. Fine. So we shall create the resource, that is user ID. So what we have provided. Okay. Okay, so under user table, what we will be doing, like under user column, we'll try to add some user, that is post method. We'll be using the lambda and we'll be passing these and we'll create. So see here inside table we do not have any data, right? So explore table items. Okay. See here we do not have any item counts. Okay. So we have created the post method and we'll try to deploy in the same thing. We'll try to access it from here. Okay. Since I do not have any APIs, sorry, UI components, so I need to go with the API testing tools. Okay, or else you can test internally. Go to resource, select your method, and here we have called test. Inside body in JSON format, we need to provide like user ID should be within the quotes. And we'll try to test whether we can able to add it or not. Okay, so we are encountering some internal server error, access denied exception. So why it is throwing the error like access denied? Since we have permissions only basic execution, so we do not have access to our any AWS resources to do, so we need to add permission. So what resources I am trying to access in AWS? DynamoDB, right? So inside what I am doing, I will be creating, that is put item, get item, delete item, and update items. Fine. So these are the CRUD operations, right? So get in the sense I will be retrieving the item. Put, you are updating same, sorry, you will be pushing new item, updating the existing one, and deleting the existing. Okay. So if you want to restrict your permissions or the access to particular table, so you can add it here. Or if you want to apply all, that is all permission to all the tables available, you can mention here all. But all, see they are throwing, so maybe only permissible for the selected actions only, like that they are doing. So don't go and search for ARN in the DynamoDB resource. Okay, so you need to create here itself. So add ARN, you just, and provide the region, so where it is situated. So where I have created here, you can make out the region, just copy, paste, and resource table name. So what is the name of my table? That is correct. I'm providing. So this is the ARN. So automatically it's got created here. Fine. So all these permissions are limited to this table only. So if you are trying to access any other table apart from CRUD, you won't get access, or it will throw you same error like access denied. Okay, so for next and give it as demo. Okay, so now the policy is created. So inside my policies, I have added the certain things. Fine. So we'll try to access it now. So item successfully created. So let us cross verify Explore table items. See here. So user ID will got created. So since I do not have the UI component or the UI thing, so I'll be testing here itself. And it can, if you are trying to pass any string components means you want to get it. We'll see whether it will show. Okay, so validation exception, that is we are passing the string component or the string value for the type of integer. For that we are getting or we are encountering that. So if you have the integer thing, so item successfully created. And to do cross verify, just go and run this. We have this one. Fine. See here. So this is how we can access our backend resources with the help of API Gateway. Fine. So this is all about the concept of API Gateway in AWS, and this is how exactly the API Gateway will going to work. And here I am doing the transaction. So for example, assume that instead of test we do have add buttons. I will be hitting the add button. So in backend automatically it will go to my function, and let me show you. See here. So I have linked my API gateway to my backend resource or the function. Okay, so lambda function, that is serverless, so where my problem statement is running. So what is my problem statement? Here I am running the problem statement. So what I have written here, so whenever there is add button got clicked, so come here and try to have interaction with the DynamoDB service and store the data whatever they are trying to add. So again we'll run it. So since it's already exist, it is not overlapping. Why it is not overlapping? Since it's a primary key. Okay, so primary key in the sense only one, so that is distinct element can be stored there. Fine. Okay, so hopefully everyone has understood the concept as well as working and why should we go with the API things and all. So thank you. Stay tuned for more videos on AWS.